Hello, friends. Hello, fellow travelers on this journey. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Right now, wherever you are in the world, what time is it? Maybe it's sunrise in Tokyo, sunset in California, or a quiet, lamplit night in Paris. Whoever you are, wherever you are, would you do me a favor and leave a comment below? I want to know how vast our family here truly is. I want to feel your presence right here, right now, because today I need you. I truly do. The story I'm about to tell you isn't a victory. At least it doesn't start as one. It's a confession about how I built a family with my own two hands, how I watched it shine brighter than any star in the desert sky, and then how I stood by, helpless as it began to tear itself apart from the inside. This is the story of how pride, betrayal, and a buried secret nearly destroyed everything we ever stood for. But I'm asking you to stay with me until the very end, because the truth, the one that nearly drowned us all, turned out to be something else entirely. A truth that not a single one of us could have ever imagined. And a truth that, if I'm being honest, was largely my fault. Our family had a name, the Lumina Players. We weren't just another theater troupe in the sprawling, sun-drenched city of Alexandria, a place where art and knowledge grew as thick as the reeds along the Nile. We were a dream, made real. The dream of our great mentor, a spiritual father to us all, whom we had lost to the passage of time. He believed that the stage was not merely a place for entertainment, but a sacred space, a sanctuary where broken souls could be mended, where truth could be spoken through poetry, and where the light within a single person could vanquish the darkness in the hearts of the audience. That was the legacy he entrusted to me and to all of us. I can still remember those golden days as if they were yesterday. I can smell the distinct scent of stage dust and old papyrus, mingled with the expensive perfumes of the patrons in the front rows. I can see the flicker of the oil lamps casting long, dancing shadows on our passionate faces during late-night rehearsals. The sound of applause after each performance wasn't just noise. It was a current, a palpable energy that surged through the floorboards and into our very bones, confirming that our work mattered, that our mentor's dream was alive and breathing. We weren't just colleagues, we were brothers and sisters. We shared every loaf of bread, every skin of wine, every tremor of fear before the curtain rose, and every tear of joy when it finally fell. We were the brightest stars in Alexandria, not because of our individual talents, but because we had each other. We were a single unified body, a single heart beating to the rhythm of the story. But there is a harsh law of physics, a truth our mentor once warned me about. He said, "Silas, my son, remember this. The brighter the light, the darker and more defined the shadow it casts behind it." I didn't fully grasp his meaning then. I thought it was just poetry. I didn't understand until the whispers began. They didn't arrive like a sudden storm, but crept in like a poisonous fog, starting in the shadowed corners of the backstage in the wine-soaked conversations after the shows. I heard them first from Lyra, a young actress whose eyes, once so clear and full of hope, now held a permanent glint of sorrow. She told me in a trembling voice that our family was cracking. Small hairline fractures at first, but deep enough to eventually bring down an empire. And so today, I have decided I can no longer be silent. The time has come to pull back the velvet curtain of pretense and confront the ugly truth festering within our own house. That crack has now become a chasm, a great canyon that has split us into three warring factions, three lonely islands drifting further apart on an ocean of pride. First, there is the faction they call the Heart, the ones who have remained loyal to me. They believe, as I do, that true art must be born from raw, unfiltered emotion, from a place of painful honesty. They are willing to sacrifice technical perfection for a single, authentic moment on stage. A real tear, a gut-wrenching scream that isn't rehearsed, but torn from the soul. They look upon the others and see a cold, calculated performance, a soulless display of technique. To them, art is a prayer, a bearing of the soul. On the opposite shore stands the craft, led by the brilliant Orion. He is a young director, a prodigy whose talent is as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel and whose mind calculates every beat, every pause. Orion and his followers believe that emotion without discipline is merely chaos. To them, art is precision. It is the flawless execution of every gesture, the perfect delivery of every line, the mastery of the craft. They look at us, the heart, and they see sloppiness, amateurism, a disrespect for the discipline that our profession demands. They crave the roar of applause for their virtuosity, while we long for the breathless, empathetic silence of the audience. And trapped in the no man's land between us is the Foundation, led by Magnus, a veteran actor whose face is a roadmap of time and memory. He and his followers trust neither me nor Orion. They trust only in the sacred words and traditions of our late mentor. They cling to every syllable of the old scripts, every piece of stage direction he ever gave. They see my faction as dangerous progressives, and Orion's as unfeeling technocrats. They are the guardians of the temple, but they have forgotten that the temple was built to worship a living spirit, not to stand watch over cold ashes. Do you see? Our conflict is no longer a simple matter of loyalty. It has metastasized into a philosophical war. What is the soul of the Lumina players? Is it emotion? Is it technique? Or is it tradition? We have forgotten that our mentor's answer was always all of it. We became so busy building the walls of our own factions that we didn't realize we were all becoming prisoners. Our discussions are no longer about art. They're about being right. Our troop meetings have become tribunals. Constructive feedback has been twisted into personal attacks. It feels like a legendary band breaking up, not over money, but over irreconcilable creative differences. We have become the very tragedy we used to perform. If our schism into factions was a festering wound, then what I must tell you now is the dagger thrust directly into the heart of our family. A betrayal so profound, so bone-deep, I would have sooner expected it from our most bitter rivals than from one of our own brothers. I am speaking of Cassian, and I am speaking of the Crimson Phoenix. To an outsider, the Crimson Phoenix is just a name, a title, but to us it was the stuff of legend. It was our mentor's final unpublished masterpiece. He spent the last years of his life, his body failing him, pouring every last ounce of his wisdom, his pain, and his hope into its pages. He told me it was the culmination of his life's work, the grand tapestry woven from every thread of his experience. He kept it a holy secret known only to me, the one he considered his son. His dying wish was that it would only be performed when the Lumina players had reached a pinnacle of harmony and understanding. It was to be a crown for a king, not a toy for children. And then the news reached me like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. Lyra, her face pale and her eyes brimming with tears, told me everything. Cassian, our rising star, the talented boy we had all nurtured and championed, had somehow found the manuscript, and now he was performing it. In a small back-alley theater on the outskirts of the city, he was performing it under his own name. He was taking the bows, soaking in the praise, accepting the accolades for a masterpiece he had stolen. My first feeling wasn't anger. It was a cold, hollowing void. It felt as if all the air had been punched from my lungs. This was more than theft. This was desecration. It was like robbing a tomb to steal the most precious burial offerings. It was spitting on the legacy that gave us our very identity. Cassian hadn't just stolen words on a page. He had stolen our mentor's soul. He had stolen our hope. He had stolen the future we were all meant to build together. And the worst part? The reaction from our fractured family. Orion's faction decried our carelessness, seeing it as the inevitable result of the emotional chaos of the heart. Magnus's faction wailed that it was proof of the moral decay of the younger generation. And my own people? They just looked to me, their eyes demanding retribution, a swift and terrible punishment. Not one of them, not a single one, saw that Cassian's act wasn't the cause of our sickness. It was merely the most visible symptom, a symptom of a disease called self. Everyone saw the tragedy through the warped lens of their own faction, using it as more fuel for their own righteous fire, and in that moment I knew we were well and truly lost. And now we come to the hardest part of this story, the part I have avoided telling even myself, my own confession. I have stood here pointing my finger at the factions, at Cassian's betrayal, as if I were some blameless judge on high. But the truth is not so simple. The truth is that the seeds of this decay, many of them, were sown by my own hand, sown by my own fear. When our mentor passed and left the legacy of the Lumina players to me, I didn't feel honored. I felt terrified. I would look at my own reflection, at my own narrow shoulders, and wonder how I could possibly carry such a colossal weight. Who was I? I was just Silas. I didn't possess Orion's thundering intellect. I didn't have Magnus's encyclopedic knowledge of our traditions. I certainly didn't have Cassian's raw, magnetic stage presence. All I had was a heart that loved this art and loved these people. But was love enough? In those first months, I walked on eggshells. I was so afraid of alienating Orion and his brilliant mind that I gave him too much leeway, allowing his philosophy of cold precision to gain too strong a foothold. I was so afraid of hurting the venerable Magnus that I shied away from challenging the outdated traditions that were holding us back. I was so afraid of dimming the light of young talents like Cassian that I failed to be firm when I saw the first signs of arrogance. I tried to be the all-pleasing older brother, and in doing so, I failed to be the leader they needed. I was so focused on keeping the ship from rocking that I didn't notice it was slowly taking on water. I avoided the difficult conversations. I let small disagreements fester into bitter resentments. Perhaps my indecisiveness, my hesitation to take a firm stand, created a vacuum of power, and into that vacuum the weeds of pride and factionalism grew wild and unchecked. When Lyra brought me the news of the divisions, when I learned of Cassian's theft, rage boiled inside me. But beneath that rage was a deeper, more searing emotion, shame. I had failed. I had failed the trust of my mentor. Looking at all of you fighting, I didn't just see your failures. I saw my own failure as a successor, a brother, a friend, reflected back at me 1,000 times over. My silence had been a form of consent to this slow motion collapse. And that is a weight I have carried every single day. I have told you their sins, but this one is mine, and it is just as heavy. Cassian's scandal, this stolen play, it was like an open wound, a malignant tumor on the body of our troop for all to see. But a good physician doesn't just treat the tumor, he seeks the source of the cancer. And as I forced myself to look deeper, past the factions, past the singular act of betrayal, I saw it. A more pervasive sickness, a slow-acting poison that had been secretly dripping into the bloodstream of the Lumina players for months, corrupting us from within. It began in the small things, the subtle shifts in our culture, the after-show gatherings. Once they were warm, communal affairs where we would break bread and share stories. They devolved into raucous drinking contests, cliquey events where the stars of the show were surrounded by sycophants while the silent, tireless workers of the backstage, the costumers who stitched our dreams together, the stagehands who built our worlds, were forgotten in the corners. A class system had emerged in the one place that was supposed to be a true meritocracy. Then came the arrogance in the rehearsal hall. I watched young, gifted actors, flush with a few good reviews, begin to dismiss the guidance of their elders. They would show up late, lines unlearned, and treat constructive criticism as a personal insult. Humility, the one virtue our mentor prized above all others in an artist, was being replaced by a brittle, defensive ego. And most painfully, it was in how we began to treat one another. Healthy, creative competition, the kind that pushes everyone to be better, curdled into a toxic jealousy. One person's brilliant performance became the source of another's bitter resentment. We started to whisper behind each other's backs, to trade in rumors, to look for faults in others to make ourselves feel more secure. We had forgotten that the spotlight is big enough for everyone to share. Do you understand? Cassian's theft wasn't an isolated incident. It was the inevitable volcanic eruption from a culture of toxicity that we all helped to create and tolerate. Cassian saw an environment where self-interest was king, where fame was valued over integrity, where the ends justified the means, and he simply acted according to the rules of the world he saw around him. He was a product of a broken system. We used to be a family. We had become a collection of talented, toxic strangers sharing a stage. We would perform tales of love and sacrifice for 1,000 people, and then, behind the curtain, we couldn't spare an ounce of kindness for each other. That was the real tragedy. That was the deeper sickness we all needed to cure. And now we arrive at the heart of the matter, the moment where everything you think you know is about to shatter. I've spoken of the factions, the betrayal, my own confessed failures. I have painted a bleak portrait of a family on the brink of collapse. All of you, my own faction of the heart, Orion's craft, Magnus's foundation, and yes, even poor, misguided Cassian, you were all fighting, grieving, and pointing fingers over one thing, the masterpiece. The Crimson Phoenix, you were all struggling to possess it, to protect it, to define it. But what if I told you that you were all wrong? What if I told you that you were fighting over something that didn't exist in the way you imagined? In my despair after learning of Cassian's theft, I tore through our mentor's archives, searching for some answer, some clue, and I found it. Not in a trunk of scripts, but tucked away inside a dusty journal on a single yellowed sheet of papyrus, sealed with his personal wax signet. It was a letter addressed to me with an instruction to be opened only in our company's darkest hour. And this is what it said. My dearest Silas, our mentor had written, if you are reading this, it means our family is in a storm. And I suspect the Crimson Phoenix is at its center. They are likely fighting over it. Some will want to own it, others to preserve it, but they do not know the truth that only you now will know. The play, The Crimson Phoenix, I intentionally left it unfinished. You heard me correctly. The grand masterpiece, the final work, was incomplete. Our mentor had penned 2 breathtaking acts, building the conflict, crafting characters of incredible depth. But the final act? It was a collection of blank pages, utterly terrifyingly empty. The letter continued. I realized, my son, that the greatest legacy I could leave behind was not a perfect play. The world has enough of those. The greatest legacy I could leave was a perfect company. The Crimson Phoenix is not a product. It is a test. It is an invitation. Its final act cannot be written by one man. It can only be born when all of you, in all your glorious, frustrating difference, come together. When the heart of Silas, the mind of Orion, and the memory of Magnus work as one, when compassion can forgive a lost soul like Cassian, the final act of the play is your harmony. That was it. The twist, the revelation that knocked the wind out of me. Cassian hadn't stolen a finished masterpiece. He had stolen an open question. We weren't fighting over a treasure. We were fighting over an empty box. Our entire war, all the bitterness, all the division, was predicated on a misunderstanding our mentor had anticipated. and we, all of us, had failed his test spectacularly. Can you imagine how I felt in that moment? It was as if the very ground beneath my feet had dissolved. Everything I believed, all my anger, all my grief, suddenly felt misplaced, foolish. But after the initial shock, a new feeling began to seep in. Understanding, liberation, and an overwhelming, boundless love for my mentor. The man was a genius, a true master of the human heart. He knew that a finished masterpiece would only become a source of conflict and jealousy. It would be a golden idol to be worshipped, or a weapon to be wielded. So, instead of giving us a fish, he gave us a fishing lesson. He didn't want to leave behind a dead masterpiece on a scroll. He wanted to forge a living masterpiece, us, the Lumina players. And as I reread his letter, it all began to make sense. The true art he wanted us to pursue. It wasn't just beautiful poetry. True art was the sight of Orion, with all his technical brilliance, patiently showing a new actor how to breathe life into a line. It wasn't just tears on a stage. True art was the moment Magnus, the guardian of tradition, smiled and nodded in approval at a bold, fresh idea from a younger member. It wasn't about fame or applause. True art was a lead actor stepping back to allow their scene partner to shine. It was the work of the costumers staying up all night to mend a torn garment, not for pay, but because they knew it was essential to the actor's performance. True art, my friends, was never about the play. It was about us. It was about how we treated each other when the lights went down. It was about respect, humility, forgiveness, and lifting each other up. It was about love. Love was the missing final act of the Crimson Phoenix. Love was the highest art form of all. We had been so busy arguing over the color of the paint that we forgot we were supposed to be building a cathedral together. And now, armed with this truth, I realized that cathedral could still be saved. The stones were all still there. We just had to learn how to place them together again. This truth was like a fire. It burned away the pride, the bitterness, the lies. But from those ashes, something new and hopeful could be born. Our mentor was no pessimist. He didn't set up a test to watch us fail. He set up the test because he had an unwavering faith in our potential. He believed that from the wreckage of our division, a phoenix far more brilliant than the one in his play could rise. That phoenix is us, our comeback story, our glow up. I suddenly realized his entire legacy wasn't just a collection of plays. It was a blueprint for this very recovery. He saw our conflicts coming and had planted the seeds of their resolution long ago. He gave my faction the heart, the fire of emotion, not to immolate ourselves in chaos, but to be a hearth for others, to remind everyone why we started this journey. He blessed Orion's faction, the craft, with precision and discipline, not so they could become cold and distant, but so they could build a strong, sturdy vessel to contain that emotional fire, allowing it to burn brighter and longer without consuming us. And he left Magnus's faction, the foundation, with memory and tradition, not to become a prison, but to be an anchor, to keep our ship from losing its way in the storms of change. And Cassian, perhaps our mentor foresaw that there would be Cassians, lost, talented souls so desperate for recognition they would take disastrous shortcuts. And in that, he left us our greatest challenge. Could we see the desperation behind the mistake? Did we have enough love to guide a lost sheep back to the flock, instead of casting it out to the wolves? This is not a story of an ending. It is a story of a resurrection. Our mentor spent his final years not writing a play, but creating a path to redemption for us. He gave us all the pieces. It is our job now to learn how to fit them together. The comeback of the Lumina players will be the greatest masterpiece we ever produce. It will not be performed on a stage. It will be lived in our lives. And so, the final act of our great play remains unwritten. The blank pages our mentor left are still there, waiting. But they are no longer a symbol of absence. They are an invitation to the stage for every single one of us. Next week, on this very day, the main stage of the theater will be open, not for a rehearsal. There will be no script, no director, just chairs arranged in a circle. That stage will be open for us to listen, to confess, to forgive, to heal. I will not cast Cassian out. Instead, I will send him an invitation to come back not as a thief, but as a prodigal son, to bring the unfinished play with him and to read aloud his own confession. That act of courage will be the greatest performance of his life. I will ask Orion and Magnus to sit beside each other, not as rivals, but as master craftsmen, one holding the blueprints of the future, the other holding the foundations of the past. And I will ask them to design a bridge. And to all of you, members of the Lumina Players, I invite you to come. Bring your broken pieces, bring your anger, your hurt, your disappointment. Do not hide them. Place them in the center of our circle, and together we will use those shards to create a beautiful mosaic, a mosaic of imperfection, of grace, and of a family learning to love again. The final act of The Crimson Phoenix will not be written with ink. It will be written with the tears of repentance, the embraces of reconciliation, and the laughter of rediscovered joy. Our greatest play, it turns out, was never The Crimson Phoenix. Our greatest play is, and always has been, The Lumina Players, and its final act depends entirely on what we do in the coming days. The stage is set, the lights are on, and for the first time in a very long time, I am not afraid. I am just hopeful. Thank you for listening to my confession. Thank you for being here. If you believe in stories of healing, of second chances, if our family's story has resonated with some part of your own heart, then become a part of this journey with us. Hit that subscribe button because this isn't the end. This is just the end of Act 1, and I promise you what comes next will be worth watching. I am Silas, and I am waiting for my family to come home with all my love.